My name is Hazel. I was 17 years old, standing barefoot on the cold concrete of our driveway in Dublin, Ohio, holding a trash bag filled with clothes I hadn't packed myself. It was almost midnight. The porch light buzzed above me, that faint electric hum drilling into my head, while my parents stood in the doorway like strangers, who had already decided I didn't belong inside anymore. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father kept his arms crossed, like he was bracing himself against something unpleasant. I remember thinking, this can't be real. Families argue. Sisters fight. Parents cool down. They don't usually throw their child out over something she didn't even know she was accused of. But that night, my name stopped belonging to me. Before I go any further, let me ask you something. What would you do if the people who raised you believed a lie about you? Without ever asking for your side? I grew up believing my family was normal, not perfect, just normal. My dad worked long hours in insurance. My mom volunteered at church, ran the household, and believed deeply in appearances. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, where lawns were trimmed evenly and secrets stayed behind closed doors. And then there was my sister, Megan. Megan was 3 years older than me and everything I wasn't. Confident, charming, effortlessly social. Teachers adored her. Neighbors remembered her name. At family gatherings, people leaned in when she spoke. I was the quiet one, the helpful one, the one who cleaned up after dinner without being asked. I didn't resent Megan growing up. Not at first. I admired her. I followed her around like a shadow, believing proximity might rub off something magical. But slowly, subtly, I learned my role. Megan was the story. I was the footnote. When Megan got a B, it was because the teacher was unfair. When I got an A, it was expected. When Megan forgot chores, she was overwhelmed. When I forgot once, it became a lecture about responsibility. No one ever said they loved her more. They didn't have to. The first humiliation I remember wasn't loud. It didn't involve shouting or punishment. It was Thanksgiving. I was 14. Extended family crowded our dining room, and my aunt asked about college plans. I mentioned wanting to study psychology someday. I'd been reading about trauma, about why people act the way they do. My dad laughed. Not cruelly, just dismissively. Hazel's always been sensitive, he said, waving his hand. She won't last in something intense like that. Everyone chuckled politely. I smiled too, because that's what you do when your confidence gets folded into a joke at your expense. But inside, something small folded with it. Megan, meanwhile, announced she was considering law school. The room lit up. That was the first time I understood. I could be kind, hardworking, invisible, and still not be taken seriously. By 16, I was working part-time after school. I saved most of my paycheck for college. Megan, on the other hand, drifted in and out of jobs, borrowing money, always with a story attached. My parents worried about her constantly. They barely noticed me. Then things started to change. Megan became colder. She'd make comments that landed wrong. Little things. You're so uptight, Hazel. No wonder you don't have many friends. You should loosen up if you want people to like you. Once in front of her friends, she joked that I still acted like a kid. I laughed along. But humiliation has layers, and those moments stacked quietly. The summer before my senior year, Megan moved back home after issues with her roommate. No one pressed her for details. They never did. I gave up my room so she could have space. I slept on a pull-out couch in the basement. That was the second humiliation, less visible but heavier. Being displaced in your own home without anyone asking how you felt. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself family sacrifices were normal. I told myself a lot of things. What I didn't know was that while I was folding myself smaller, someone else was rewriting my story entirely. It started with whispers I wasn't meant to hear. A neighbor's look that lingered too long. A sudden chill when I walked into a room. My mom checking my phone randomly. I asked if something was wrong. She said, "Of course not." But something was already rotting beneath the surface. And the lie, whatever it was, had already found its way home. I just didn't know yet that it would cost me everything I thought was safe. By the time I realized my sister had told a story with my name in it, my parents had already chosen who to believe. And the night they confronted me, I learned how fragile love becomes when it's built on convenience instead of truth. But that confrontation, that moment when my life split into before and after, that deserves its own breath. Because once you hear what they accused me of, you'll understand why I never walked back through that door the same way again. I knew something was wrong the moment my mother asked me to sit down. Not talk, not explain, just sit. We were in the living room. The same couch where I'd watched movies as a kid, where I'd fallen asleep during thunderstorms because it felt safe there. That night, it felt like a courtroom with no defense allowed. My father stood near the window. Megan sat in the armchair, legs crossed, face calm. Too calm. My mom folded her hands like she was about to pray. "H. Azel," she said, "we need you to be honest with us." My stomach dropped. "About what?" I asked. She inhaled sharply. "About what you've been doing behind our backs." I remember blinking. Once, twice, waiting for the sentence to finish. It didn't. My dad finally turned around. "Megan told us some things. Things we didn't want to believe at first." Megan didn't look at me. That's when fear turned into something colder. "What things?" I asked. And then my mother said it. Quietly, carefully. Like, she was afraid the words themselves might explode. She said you've been spreading rumors about her. That you told people she was sleeping with someone's husband. The room tilted. What? My voice cracked in a way I couldn't control. "That's not true. I never said that." My mom's lips pressed together. "She said you were jealous. That you've been trying to ruin her reputation because you feel overlooked." I looked at Megan. Finally. She shrugged, just slightly. "I didn't want to tell them," she said. "But it got back to me anyway." The humiliation hit all at once. Not because of the accusation alone, but because of how reasonable they all seemed to find it. As if the idea of me being malicious made more sense than the possibility of Megan lying. "I would never do that," I said, louder now. "You know me. I don't even talk to anyone." My dad sighed. "That's not the point. Hazel, people like you hold things in until they come out sideways. People like me." That was the third humiliation, being psychoanalyzed into guilt. I tried to defend myself. I explained where I'd been, who I talked to, how little of a social life I actually had. I even handed over my phone without being asked. "No messages, no evidence, no proof," Megan cried. "Just enough." "I don't understand why she hates me," she whispered. "I've always tried to help her." My mother reached for her hand. I felt invisible again, except this time I was also guilty. "Why would I do something like that?" I asked, my voice shaking. My mom's answer still echoes in my chest. "Sometimes people don't know why they hurt others." That was it. That was the verdict. No investigation. No benefit of the doubt. Just disappointment layered over suspicion. Things changed immediately after that night. My parents started monitoring me, asking where I was going, who I was texting. Megan's friends stopped acknowledging me if they saw me in public. At church, whispers followed. One woman asked my mom, "Is Hazel okay? She seems troubled." That was the fourth humiliation, being turned into a cautionary tale without ever being present for the conversation. I stopped going out unless I had to. I stopped speaking unless spoken to. I learned how to exist quietly in a house where I was no longer trusted. Megan, meanwhile, flourished. She started going out more, laughing loudly, making jokes at my expense when she thought I couldn't hear. One night, I overheard her telling someone on the phone, "Yeah, she's always been unstable." I locked myself in the bathroom and cried so quietly, I scared myself. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. My mom called me into the kitchen. My dad was there. Megan wasn't. "We think it's best if you stay with a friend for a while," my mom said. "A while?" I asked. "Until things calm down," my dad added. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out wrong, sharp and disbelieving. "I didn't do anything," I said. My mom's eyes filled with tears. "We can't have this kind of negativity in the house." Negativity? That's what I was now. Not their daughter, not a sister. A problem to be removed. That night, they handed me the trash bag. No hug. No apology. No plan. Just a door closing behind me while Megan watched from the hallway. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. And standing there under the porch light, I realized something terrifying. If I didn't protect myself now, no one ever would. But survival doesn't always look like fighting back. Sometimes it looks like walking away quietly and remembering everything, because years later, when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't need me to scream. It would speak for itself. And when that moment came, I would decide not how to get revenge, but how much access they would ever have to me again. The first night I slept away from my house, I didn't actually sleep. I lay on my friend Lauren's couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, uneven circles. Every sound made my body tense, the hum of the fridge, a car passing outside, the soft breathing from Lauren's bedroom. I kept expecting my phone to buzz. An apology, a question, a come home. Nothing came. That silence was the fifth humiliation. Not public, not loud, but absolute. The kind that tells you exactly how replaceable you are. Lauren's mom was kind in that careful, temporary way people are when they don't want to get attached. She made space for me, but I could tell she assumed I'd be gone soon. So did I. But days turned into weeks. My parents didn't call. Megan didn't text. When I reached out once, just once, my mother replied with a single sentence. "We think space is best right now." Space. Like I was the one who needed to cool off from a crime I didn't commit. I finished high school in survival mode. I woke up early. I studied hard. I worked extra shifts. I stopped talking about my family entirely. When teachers asked where my parents were for events, I said they were busy. The lie tasted bitter, but it was easier than the truth. Graduation came and went. I watched other families cry, hug, celebrate. Lauren's parents clapped for me politely. No one shouted my name. That absence hurt more than if they'd shown up angry. College wasn't some dramatic escape. It was quiet, practical, lonely. I enrolled at a community college nearby because it was what I could afford. I lived with 2 roommates who were kind but distant. Everyone had their own lives, their own histories. I learned something important during that time. When no one is watching you, you finally get to see who you really are. Without my family's expectations pressing in, I discovered I wasn't broken. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't unstable. I was cautious, thoughtful, observant. I was someone who noticed patterns. And once I started looking back, I noticed one pattern I couldn't ignore. Megan didn't just lie once. She curated narratives. The memory came back slowly, like something my mind had buried for safety. The way she'd complain about friends until they drifted away. The way she always seemed like the victim in every story. The way conflict followed her, but accountability never did. I started writing things down. Not for revenge, just to organize my thoughts, to make sure I wasn't gaslighting myself the way my family had. That notebook became my anchor. Because when you've been accused falsely, the scariest thing isn't anger, it's doubt. Years passed. I transferred to a 4-year university. I worked in a research lab. I built a resume quietly, without announcing it to anyone who had once underestimated me. My parents didn't attend my college graduation either. But by then, the pain had changed shape. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was distant. Like a scar you forget about until the weather changes. The next time my family reached out was unexpected. It was an email from my mother, sent late at night. "Hazel, we've been thinking about you. Megan has been going through a hard time. We're hoping you can be the bigger person and reconnect." I stared at the screen for a long time. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a request, wrapped in obligation. That was when I realized something essential. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. And for the first time, I didn't respond right away because I had grown into someone who understood that boundaries aren't punishments. They're information, and the next time I saw Megan, she wouldn't recognize the version of me she thought she'd erased. But that meeting, the one that would finally test whether I had truly healed, would come sooner than I expected. I almost deleted the email. Not out of anger, out of instinct. When you've built a life without chaos, you learn to recognize the shape of it before it enters the room. The subject line was simple. Family dinner. No apology, no context. Just expectation. I didn't answer that night, or the next. But 2 weeks later, a second email came. This time from my father. "Your mother isn't well? It would mean a lot if you came." That sentence did what it was designed to do. It pressed on guilt. So I agreed on my terms. I replied, "I can come, but I won't stay overnight. And I won't discuss the past unless it's acknowledged honestly." The response was immediate. Of course, my mom wrote, "We just want peace." Peace, I'd learned, often meant silence from the wrong person. Walking back into that house felt surreal. The walls were the same. The furniture hadn't moved. Even the smell, cleaner mixed with old carpet, was exactly as I remembered. But I was different. Megan was already there when I arrived. She looked tired, thinner, less polished. When she saw me, her smile froze for half a second before settling into something forced. "H. Hazel," she said, like my name was a formality. Dinner was polite, careful. Everyone spoke around things instead of about them. My parents asked about my job, my apartment, my plans. They didn't ask how it felt to be exiled. That was the 6th humiliation, being welcomed back, as a guest in a life that used to be mine. Halfway through dessert, Megan excused herself to take a call. When she returned, her phone was face down on the table. I recognize that posture. People do it when they don't want notifications seen. My mom leaned toward her. Everything okay? Megan sighed dramatically. Just work stress. People spreading rumors again. The room went quiet. I felt my chest tighten. My father frowned. About you? She nodded. It's like no matter what I do, someone always wants to tear me down. I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry either. I was clear. Who? I asked calmly. Megan blinked. What? Who's spreading them? She hesitated. Just a second too long. I don't know, she said. It's complicated. My mother glanced at me, then back at her. This sounds familiar. The air shifted. I didn't push. I didn't accuse. I waited. 2 days later, my mother called me. Her voice was different. Unsteady. H. Azel, she said. Can you come over? We need to talk. I asked, what about? She paused. Something doesn't add up, she said quietly. That sentence was everything. When I arrived, my parents were sitting at the kitchen table. Megan wasn't there. My dad slid his laptop toward me. On the screen was a long email chain. Dates, names, screenshots. Megan had been caught, again. This time, she'd accused a coworker of something untrue. The company investigated. The story unraveled. The pattern emerged. And once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. My mom's hands were shaking. She lied before, my father said slowly. Didn't she? I didn't say yes. I didn't need to. My silence held more weight than anger ever could. That was the moment the power shifted, not because I demanded justice, but because the truth finally arrived. And I didn't chase it this time. But what they asked me next, what they expected me to fix, would determine whether reconciliation was possible at all, and whether forgiveness required access. My mother cried first. Not loud, dramatic crying, just quiet tears that fell onto the kitchen table, one after another, as if they'd been waiting for permission. We should have listened, she said. We failed you. My father stared at his hands. He didn't argue. That alone felt unreal. I don't know how we missed it, my mom continued, but we see it now. The pattern. The manipulation. She looked at me then. Really looked. I'm so sorry, Hazel. There it was. The apology I had imagined 100 different ways over the years. And yet, it didn't land the way I thought it would. Because apologies don't rewind time. They don't give you back the nights you cried alone. They don't erase the way trust collapses when you need it most. They acknowledge. And sometimes, acknowledgement comes after the damage has already shaped you. They asked where I'd been staying all those years, what I'd been doing, how I'd managed on my own. I answered calmly, briefly, not because I wanted to punish them, but because my life no longer required their validation to feel complete. Then my father asked the question I'd been bracing for. Would you consider coming home more often? He said, rebuilding things? Rebuilding, as if nothing had been demolished. I took a breath. I'm open to having a relationship, I said slowly, but not the one we had before. They exchanged looks. What does that mean? My mom asked. It means I don't explain myself anymore, I said. I don't compete with Megan, and I don't stay in spaces where I'm doubted. My father nodded. That's fair. Then came the real test. Megan arrived an hour later. She didn't know I'd be there. When she saw me, her face tightened. Our parents told her everything. She didn't deny it. She just said, I was going through a lot back then. That was her version of accountability. She turned to me. I'm sorry if you got hurt. If. I waited for anger to rise. It didn't. What I felt instead was something steadier. I accept your apology, I said, but I don't want a relationship with you right now. The room froze. My mother opened her mouth, closed it again. Megan scoffed. You're really going to hold a grudge forever? I met her eyes. This isn't a grudge, I said. It's a boundary. That was the 7th humiliation, but this time it wasn't mine. It was hers. Because for the first time, her words didn't control the room. I left shortly after. No slammed doors. No raised voices. Just clarity. In the weeks that followed, my parents tried. They called. They asked questions. They respected my space, mostly. Megan didn't. She sent messages accusing me of tearing the family apart. I didn't respond. That silence was my final answer. Life didn't become perfect after that. It became quieter. And in that quiet, I found something I'd never had before. Peace without permission. I built my career. I built friendships rooted in mutual respect. I built a chosen family that knew my character without requiring proof. Years later, my parents and I maintain a careful relationship. We talk, we visit occasionally, but I don't shrink for them anymore. And Megan, she remains a lesson, not a presence. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Being related doesn't entitle anyone to access. Love isn't proven by endurance of harm. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't exposure or confrontation. It's becoming someone who no longer fits the story they tried to tell about you. So I'll ask you what I asked myself all those years ago. If someone believed a lie about you without listening, would you fight to be understood? Or would you build a life that made the truth undeniable? I didn't expect the aftermath to be so ordinary. No dramatic fallout. No sudden transformation. Just time doing what it always does. Revealing who people are when no one is forcing them to change. After that final conversation, my parents tried harder than I expected. Not perfectly, not consistently, but intentionally. They stopped defending Megan when her name came up in conversations. They stopped asking me to understand her side. They stopped pushing me to fix things that were never mine to repair. That alone told me something important. Belief is an action, not a feeling. Megan spiraled quietly, not in a way that made headlines, not in a way that invited sympathy. She bounced between jobs. Relationships ended suddenly. Stories didn't line up. I heard these things secondhand. I never asked. That was karma, not loud, not cruel, just natural. A pattern finally meeting resistance. And for the first time, it wasn't my role to absorb the fallout. One afternoon, years later, my mother asked a question she'd never dared to ask before. "Why didn't you fight harder to stay?" she said. I thought about it. "I did," I answered. "I just stopped fighting you." She nodded slowly, like someone finally understanding a language they'd ignored too long. That conversation didn't heal everything, but it closed something. Today, my life is steady. I wake up without dread. I make decisions without fear of misinterpretation. I trust myself. That might not sound like revenge, but it is. Because the biggest lie ever told about me, that I was unstable, jealous, dangerous, collapsed the moment I stopped trying to prove otherwise. If you're listening to this and you're still inside the lie someone told about you, hear this. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be better. You don't need to convince anyone who benefits from misunderstanding you. Sometimes the most powerful justice is distance. Sometimes the truth doesn't need a witness. It just needs time. And sometimes walking away isn't losing your family, it's finding yourself. There's a strange moment that comes after you stop fighting. Not relief, not victory, just a soft, unfamiliar stillness, like standing in a room after the noise has finally died and realizing you're safe enough to breathe. That's where I found myself a year later. No announcements, no reconciliation montage. Just a life that worked. I changed apartments, not because I had to, but because I wanted a place that felt chosen, not temporary. I painted the walls a muted gray-blue and hung photos of people who knew me now, not who I used to be. Friends who didn't need explanations. Coworkers who trusted my work without suspicion. A partner who listened the first time. Those details mattered more than any apology ever could, because this was the 8th humiliation I never experienced. And that absence was the point. No one questioned my motives. No one rewrote my intentions. No one asked me to be smaller to keep the peace. Every so often, my parents would try, carefully, to step closer. A holiday invitation. A phone call without an agenda. I accepted some. Declined others. Not out of spite. Out of alignment. I learned that forgiveness doesn't require proximity. And reconciliation doesn't require access. I could care about them without returning to the conditions that once broke me. That distinction changed everything. Megan tried once more. A message late, at night. A long paragraph, lots of emotion, very little ownership. I read it. I didn't reply. That was the 9th humiliation, but again, not mine. Because nothing unsettles manipulation, like indifference that's rooted in self-respect. Here's the part no one prepares you for. When the truth finally comes out, people expect you to want something. An apology tour, a public correction, a dramatic reckoning. But sometimes, all you want is to be left alone. To let the lie die quietly because it no longer recognizes you. That's what happened to me. The story Megan told stopped working because I stopped living inside it. If you're still listening, I want to leave you with this, not as advice, but as an observation earned the hard way. You don't win by being believed by everyone. You win by believing yourself enough to stop pleading your case. Justice doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like consistency. A calm life, clear boundaries, and the courage to choose yourself, even when no one claps. So let me ask you one last question. If the people who misunderstood you never changed, would you still be brave enough to change your life anyway? Because that's where real freedom begins. I thought the story was finished. That's the lie you tell yourself? When life finally feels stable, when nothing hurts sharply anymore and you've learned how to recognize peace when it shows up quietly. Then my phone rang on a Tuesday afternoon. It was my father. His voice was careful. The way it gets when he's rehearsed what to say but doesn't know how it will land. "Jazel," he said, "your sister asked about you." I closed my eyes, not because it hurt, but because I knew what this usually meant. "She's having a hard time," he continued. "She says she wants to clear the air. Really clear it this time." I didn't answer right away. I looked around my apartment. The plants by the window, the notes on my desk, the life I'd built without needing permission from anyone who once doubted me. "What does she want?" I asked. He hesitated. "She wants to talk." "Just the two of you?" That was the final test. Not of my forgiveness, not of my compassion, of my boundaries. We met in a neutral place, a quiet cafe halfway between our lives. Megan looked older, tired in a way makeup can't hide. When she saw me, her expression flickered through relief, fear, and something close to resentment. "Hey, Jazel," she said softly. I nodded. She talked for a long time, about stress, about mistakes, about feeling misunderstood. Then she said the sentence I'd waited years to hear, but no longer needed. "I lied," she admitted. "Back then, about you." The air went still. I let the silence stretch. "I know," I said. She blinked. "That's it?" "That's it." She frowned. "Don't you want me to tell everyone? To fix it?" I thought about it. "I don't need you to fix my past," I said calmly. "I already fixed my future." Her shoulders slumped. That was the 10th humiliation, realizing the power she once had over